this was a good week of chapters, with One Piece being the only real standout, as everything else was good, but not overly exciting for the most part. So we're going to be starting off with One Piece, chapter 1052, and this was a good chapter, showing the continued quote-unquote epilogue of Wano. Seeing as how things have cooled off, the festivals are continuing in Wano, everything is looking better for its people, as well as the rumor of who saved them being Joy Boy, which I think is rather hysterical, as well as the fact that it's rumored that they've left already, even though they very much haven't, as most of the pirates that saved the day are still within the castle, it would seem, resting, recovering before they leave. We see that Luffy and Zoro took about 7 days to recover, but once they've slept off their injuries, they're perfectly fine now, as everyone else was just simply waiting for them to recover. We get to see more fun interactions between everyone, Momo being denied by Nami, which Sanji and Brooks' reaction to that feat was extremely funny, and seeing how everyone's sort of handling what's going on. Now, I know there was a bunch of discourse about how certain people handled the different deaths that were confirmed in this. For example, Kiku didn't show much emotion or reaction to Izo's death. The fact that he died was shocking to me. However, yeah, I put it more towards denial, as Kiku is more or less not focused on it. And it's been 7 days. The initial shock probably hit, and now she's trying to move on, in a manner of speaking. So maybe we'll get some more reaction when the actual funeral happens, as it is confirmed that Ashura Doji and Izo died in the Wano arc, which Ashura, I assume, did die, so I was right on that one. I was surprised he did have Izo die, but I think it was another relatively decent call, seeing as how he took down pretty much the CP0 agents on his way out. So we saw him go down fighting. The other big surprise is that it seems as though Hawkins died. He did his own prediction on whether he survives or not, and the 1% he got was for himself, knowing full well that he probably had a better chance to survive if he had joined with Law and Kid and Luffy, but his pride wouldn't allow it, and so he'd rather do what he did and died. I think for a secondary-ish antagonist for this arc, Hawkins was actually pretty good. It's a shame if he did in fact die here. I think he did, which is bold, having the first of the worst generation go down to another of the worst generation is surprising. I think Drake pretty much got up and left, and we'll see if any of that news goes around, but I think the Hawkins death was very surprising. The other major portion of this chapter was the fact that the Marines were now stuck because they can't get into the country, as Momo not opening the borders of Wano has ended up seemingly being the better play, as if he had opened the border, the Marines would be able to waltz right in and start another war that they were not prepared for. So kudos to Momo for seemingly understanding that they're not at a place to defend themselves at the moment. It seems as though he will be a strong leader. It also seems as though he took his father's strong body, despite not being physically strong himself, as in literal strength. His body is seemingly very durable. So we see them all still hanging out, partying, the whole thing, as they're celebrating their victory, when we see that Green Bull has arrived on Wano and is most likely going to cause all sorts of issues. So overall, I think I'll give this chapter an A. It was a good chapter showing the various different things that are changing in Wano, as well as the many parties that are happening as well, with the continued push forward, as well as seeing that we might be getting their new bounties next chapter, which is very exciting, as well as all sorts of different shenanigans. With Green Bull showing up, this will cause no end of problems for everyone, depending upon how Oda wants to play this. There are 3 avenues this could go. Avenue 1 is Green Bull shows up and is a terror to the pirates, and they have to leave far faster than they originally wanted to. Avenue 2 is that Green Bull shows up, and because Luffy and Co defeated Yonkos, the Admiral's nothing to them. And it's a real display of power that Green Bull, this guy we've hyped up for years at this point, basically gets Bellamy'd and gets one-punched by Luffy Luffy or Law or Kid because they're no longer afraid of the admirals. Or Avenue 3, he's just there for Robin and kidnaps her or something of that nature, allows an opening for it, / he's a bit of an idiot and doesn't really do anything. I guess there's 4, but that third one can go either way. So there's a lot of intrigue with Green Bull specifically, and next chapter, being that it's the last chapter for a month, is probably the most intriguing chapter of One Piece in a very long time, because it'll be all about how he leaves us for a while. So now we're on to Undead Unluck, chapter 114, and this was a good chapter, showing the backstory for Nico and his wife, seeing as how we've learned that Nico's wife was unsleep, so she wasn't able to sleep. This caused her to be a very good scientist, as she was just able to work constantly, but again, her body would be fatigued if she didn't rest. We see their connection, we see how important Nico and her were to each other, and one can understand why he had such an issue with the last memory being of her death. It then cuts back to the present, where Nico is fully giving himself up to Uma Ghost to get what he desires, which is his wife back. Now, Nico is an interesting case of what do you do in that scenario for the next timeline. I don't know how you'd fix it, quote unquote. You'd probably have to just find a way for Nico to forgive himself, maybe just not have him look. It'd be a hard one. It'll be interesting to see what the author does with this scenario, because this chapter was fairly good just on its own, getting the backstory for Nico, leaving basically Juiz as the only one we don't know anything about, which is extremely interesting going into the next loop, as that'll be Fuko's probable main focus. However, getting Nico's story here only complicates things in some ways that I'm thinking about it, but it was a good backstory, seeing that he was basically the same guy but less depressed before, and now his priorities shifted, which is interesting. So overall, I think I'll give this chapter a B. It was good seeing the backstory for Nico and why he is doing this, but seeing that the reasoning is still flawed, and I wonder how they're either going to quote unquote save him in the next timeline, or even here to stop him from doing something really dumb. So the next few chapters should be fairly exciting, especially as we now know his reasons for doing what he's doing. So now we're on to Mashle, Magic, and Muscles, chapter 111, and this was a good chapter, showing more matchups between Divine Visionaries and Innocent Zero's children, from the Word Visionary versing one of the children, I don't know which one, the weird pudding guy going against the Ice Mage, which is going to be a crazy matchup, the clown Innocent Zero's son versing the dragon masochist now, as he reveals he loves pain. So their battle is going to be something of legend, because it's going to be ridiculous. And we continue to see the battle between the eldest son and the immortal visionary, and their clash is getting closer as we see Melodol is trying to revive Mash, but is struggling when her assistant throws a couple of hot pastries in her face. So overall, I think I'll give this chapter a B. It was good seeing the different matchups that were being made, and the continued madness of just about everyone, with not a single one of the characters fighting being remotely sane, which is hysterical. The fights themselves should be pretty entertaining, especially as it seems as though they're relatively evenly matched, until at some point someone starts overpowering the other. So we have got some good fights up ahead, as well as Mash continuing to be revived, though it looks like it'll take a little bit longer than Melodol really would have wanted. So now we're on to Sakamoto Days, chapter 74, and this was a good chapter, telling us the reason why Sakamoto failed, and it's simply because he has a bounty on his head. No student is allowed into JCC if they have a bounty on their head. So he couldn't get in. Shin tries to call and fix the issue, but he can't. Everyone sees that he's unnecessarily angry about this whole thing, which is funny, as well as Nagumo shows up to offer a new solution to their problem, being that there is an internship for a teacher at JCC, and Sakamoto can just go and try for that, though again his bounty issue is where the problem lies. It then cuts to Akira trying to go to school but is struggling, seeing how everyone's getting injured and things things are confusing. Basically, your kind of quote-unquote normal first college experience, except add some assassins with weapons to the mix. She gets to her first class late and then is nearly stabbed because they were doing some weapon practice, but the guy she was partnered with was a tool and tried to scare her. She blocked the knife when someone hits the other student. We then see it's Sakamoto's wife, or it looks like her, as we then see that Nagumo was somehow able to make Sakamoto look like his wife, which is hysterical. So now we have female version of Sakamoto going to be this intern teacher, and he's not very happy about it. So that's all very funny. So overall, I think I'll give this chapter a B. It was a fun chapter, seeing the different reactions to Sakamoto failing, and then ultimately now Sakamoto being in full disguise for at least 24 hours. So he now has to try to find the information as quickly as possible before he gets caught, as well as now his anger being at an all-time high for having to quote-unquote cosplay as his wife, which I think is hysterical. Also seeing that Akira isn't super thrilled to be by herself in school because it seems as though everyone else has all but disappeared. Shin is probably focused on trying to get the information they need. The other two are kidnapped, and I don't think there's anyone else. Maybe the hearing guy, but you never know. So there's some fun hijinks that'll probably happen in the next few weeks, and we'll see if Sakamoto can succeed, as well as what happens with Akira in the meantime. So that was all of the chapters. Again, it was a relatively good week, but albeit not a very exciting week as a whole, outside of One Piece getting the beginnings of the information dumps that are to come, as well as the fact that we are probably getting bounties next week. We got the reveal of several characters who didn't survive the raid, and Green Bull's arrival. Undead had a good flashback to show Nico's motivations. Mashle had more good matchups being made to spice up the arc even further than it already has. And Sakamoto had a fun bit of comedy with Sakamoto now having to be in disguise to become a teacher in the JCC. Now for everything else, we had Jujutsu Kaisen, which was fine, more good fighting. Blue Box, which was fine, showing the main character still struggling with seemingly self-confidence, I guess, in his sport. Yuzakura family was good, as we see the children who were left behind to take care of the father's brother were able to take him out relatively easily, and they plan on going after the father right away, as we then see the main character and the eldest brother are still in the father's hot pursuit, when we find out that pretty much the only person that can hit the father is the main character, so the eldest brother threw him at the father. So their battle will be pretty interesting, to say the least, to see if he's able to get away or if he's going to have to take some drastic measures. The Elusive Samurai was good, as we got to see the god character really show his divine powers on the battlefield, as he's able to dodge out of lethal attacks and even use his unique sword to take the upper hand to really rally his troops to victory. So it's the battle that they're in right now is going well for the good guys for the moment, as well as the fact that the ambush on the enemy's spy seemingly is working at the moment. P times 6 was good. It seems as though the one helpful brother quote unquote turned on Lucky and is siding with his other brother who's competing with Lucky. So things are getting exciting over there. We'll see how Lucky responds to this latest blow to his ego, in a manner of speaking, as his helpful brother basically kind of warned him that being a kind person also has its faults, which I think is such an interesting way to play into that character dynamic. So I'm curious to see how this goes and how it goes further into that ideal of Lucky isn't always right, and I wonder how that's going to help him grow as a character. So the next few chapters should be pretty exciting for that. Doron was fine. It was the end of the arc. The one major villain showed up to take care of the elephant monster that they've been fighting. Takes care of the elephant monster they've been fighting, and the main character doesn't like that very much. However, the main villain is able to get away before anything really happens, and the main character and the captain that likes him him seemingly repair any type of relationship damage with the little Mononoke that's with the main character, and things are looking bright, quote unquote, for the next few chapters. So we'll see what the next arc has in store, and we'll see how much longer this one goes. Earthchild was fine. It continues its unique form of storytelling, with the father character being even more desperate than ever before to save his wife, as the cataclysm that's arrived is ultimately going to destroy her. But he's going to pull some sort of suicidal mission to try to save her no matter what, with the old Earthchild that's still alive, allowing him to give one more massive attempt to save her, probably sacrificing his own life. Or, knowing this manga, they'll all be saved somehow. And we got to see that the son character, the little bubbles they show up on occasion, he's writing a report, and he's still a young child, so it's fairly interesting. You could very much clearly see this won't last very long, and what'll happen most likely is in the next few chapters, if not maybe 10 as a whole, they'll save the mother, she'll come down, they'll live happily ever after, more or less. I wouldn't be surprised if this ends sooner rather than later. Aliens area continues to intrigue me as more continues to be built about it. I'm curious to see how it goes, because for now it's taking its time, which can be good, but also the kiss of death. So we'll see if it survives long enough. And Super Smartphone was fine, as we get to see more insight into the cop character, as our two main Superphone users are playing well above the grade that anyone else can pay attention to, as they're trying to outsmart each other by learning who each other are, as well as then trying to get the upper hand in whatever duel they're doing with their minds. So that was everything. It was a good week overall, as I said, with a lot of these chapters here being fairly good themselves, with P times 6 being probably the most exciting of the quote-unquote minor chapters. So we'll see if that can continue its hot streak or if it'll temper off, but for now it's fairly exciting. So if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, and as always, thank you for watching.